Number 15. The Shark Arm Murders. The Coogee Aquarium in Sydney had never seen such a crowd. The main attraction, a 14-foot tiger shark. The beast had been the talk of the town since it was caught by Bert Hobson and his son Ron. For days, it swam energetically in its new home, drawing in visitors who were both fascinated and terrified by the creature. But as Anzac Day approached, the shark's behavior became increasingly erratic. It moved sluggishly, bumping into the walls of its 25 by 15-foot pool and sinking to the bottom as if dragged there by a heavy weight. Suspense built slowly, and visitors were concerned about the creature's health. Then, in a sudden and convulsion, the shark vomited. A murky brown froth filled the tank, and as it cleared, something grotesque and partially digested floated to the surface, a human arm. The crowd recoiled in horror and fascination, and news of the ghastly incident spread like wildfire. In 1935, Australians were already on the edge due to a series of shark attacks along the southeast coast. But this was different. This arm, as revealed by the coroner, hadn't been bitten off. It had been cleanly severed with a knife. It seemed the shark was an unwitting participant in a murder mystery. The arm bore a distinctive tattoo of two boxers, their fists raised in combat. This clue was widely publicized and eventually led Sydney resident Edwin Smith to a chilling realization. His brother James, who had the same tattoo, had been missing for weeks. James Smith, known to his friends and foes as Jim, had a checkered past. A failed boxer turned billiards bar manager, Jim was a small-time crook and a police informant on the side. His last known associates were Reginald Holmes, a boat-building magnate with a penchant for illegal activities, and Patrick Brady, an ex-con with a dangerous reputation. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Jim had been last seen alive drinking and playing cards with Brady at the Cecil Hotel in Cronulla. The night ended at a cottage Brady was renting. Witnesses later reported seeing a disheveled Brady on his own, taking a cab from the cottage to Holmes' house. As the police delved deeper, they uncovered a network of crime and betrayal. Running his legitimate boat business as a front for smuggling drugs, forgery, and insurance scams, Holmes had a lot to lose. One of his schemes had involved the deliberate sinking of a yacht, the Pathfinder, for insurance money, a plot that Jim had helped execute and later betrayed by reporting it to the police. This had strained their relationship, leading to blackmail and ultimately murder. Brady was the first to crack under pressure. Arrested on unrelated forgery charges, he eventually confessed that Holmes was the mastermind behind Jim Smith's murder. But when the police went to apprehend Holmes, he fled in his speedboat, leading them on a wild high-speed chase through Sydney Harbor. In a dramatic climax, Holmes shot himself before a crowd of onlookers. Miraculously, he survived, the bullet grazing his skull, and he was taken into custody. Holmes' story painted Brady as the killer, claiming that Brady had murdered Jim in the cottage on Toowoomba Street. Brady had supposedly dumped the body in the sea, but kept the arm to threaten Holmes, demanding money to keep quiet. Panicked, Holmes said he had thrown the arm into the water, where the tiger shark had swallowed it. The tale was lurid and sensational, but without concrete evidence, it was hard to secure convictions. Holmes' dramatic survival didn't help. He was found dead in his car the morning he was due to testify, with 3 bullet holes in his chest, an apparent hit to ensure his silence. Brady went to trial, but with Holmes dead and no direct evidence linking him to the murder, he was acquitted. The case of the shark arm murder remains one of Australia's most bizarre unsolved mysteries. The tiger shark that brought the gruesome evidence to light was eventually killed and dissected, but it yielded no further clues. Jim Smith's body was never recovered, and the full truth behind his death is swimming with the fishes. Number 14. The disappearance of D.B. Cooper. A tie clip, some dollar bills, parachutes, and DNA. This is the only evidence left behind by a man who became known to the world as D.B. Cooper. It was November 24th, 1971, when Cooper executed one of the most audacious heists in history. Under the alias Dan Cooper, he took Flight 305 on Northwest Orient en route from Portland to Seattle. Typically a brief and routine trip, the flight that day became the stage for an unparalleled mystery that to this day is a thing of legend. An ordinary businessman in his mid-40s to all appearances, Cooper wore a white shirt and black tie and carried a briefcase. After lighting a cigarette, he ordered a bourbon and soda from the flight attendant, blending in seamlessly with the other passengers. However, shortly after takeoff, he handed a note to a flight attendant who initially dismissed it as a flirtatious gesture and pocketed it. Cooper then leaned in and said, "Miss, you better look at that note. I have a bomb." The note contained a chilling message. Cooper claimed the bomb was in his briefcase and demanded the flight attendant sit beside him. When she did, he revealed a glimpse of a battery, wires, and red sticks, presumably dynamite. Calmly, he issued his demands: $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck available in Seattle. The flight attendant relayed the demands to the cockpit. The passengers had no clue about the hijacking, believing the pilot's announcement about a mechanical issue necessitating a delay. While the plane was circling for nearly 2 hours, law enforcement and airline officials ran around trying to fulfill Cooper's demands. At 5:39 p.m., the plane landed in Seattle, where Cooper's ransom and parachutes were delivered. He released the passengers and 2 flight attendants, retaining a skeleton crew to refuel the plane and prepare for takeoff once again. Cooper instructed the pilots to head for Mexico City. Unfortunately, the plane's limited range necessitated a stop in Reno for refueling. Cooper's demands continued. The plane was to fly under 10,000 feet at a speed under 200 knots, with the landing gear down and the wing flaps raised at 15 degrees. Most critically, the rear air stairs were to remain lowered. When the plane ascended once more, Air Force jets tailed behind it. At around 8 p.m., a cockpit light indicated the air stairs had been lowered. The crew felt a noticeable change in the plane's motion after 15 minutes, suggesting that Cooper had likely jumped. At 10:15 p.m., the plane landed in Reno, and law enforcement swarmed, but Cooper had vanished. All that remained were 2 parachutes and his black clip-on tie, from which the FBI later extracted a DNA sample. Cooper had disappeared into the night, along with the ransom. The subsequent investigation, dubbed NORJAC for Northwest Hijacking, was one of the most extensive in FBI history. Despite a detailed physical description and the alias Dan Cooper, the trail quickly went cold. The name DB Cooper was a media error that stuck, further muddying the waters. Over the years, the FBI investigated over 800 suspects, but none were definitively linked to the hijacking. Prominent suspects included Richard McCoy, who executed a similar hijacking months later, and former Special Forces paratrooper Robert Rackstraw. Ultimately, neither fit all the details of the case, and both were eventually dismissed. In 1980, a breakthrough seemed possible when a young boy discovered $5,800 in decaying bills near the Columbia River. The serial numbers were a match to bills from the ransom money, but no further evidence emerged from this find. The FBI extracted DNA from Cooper's tie in 2001, which led to the elimination of suspect Dwayne Weber, who had made a deathbed confession claiming to be Cooper. Other suspects were also ruled out, despite initial promise. The FBI officially suspended active investigation in 2016, redirecting resources to other priorities. The agency still asks anyone with physical evidence, such as more ransom money or parachute remnants, to come forward. Despite the FBI stepping back, amateur sleuths, known as Cooperites, continue to investigate the mystery, hosting conventions and analyzing every scrap of available information. The possibility remains that DB Cooper's jump was his last, and he's taken his secrets to the grave. Yet the legend endures, capturing the public's imagination and embodying the ultimate unsolved mystery of modern times. Number 13. The Pollock Twins. In the quaint English town of Hexham, tragedy struck on a crisp May morning in 1957. 11-year-old Joanna Pollock and her 6-year-old sister Jacqueline were walking to church with their friend Anthony when an out-of-control car barreled towards them. The driver was a local woman driven mad with grief and under the influence of drugs, and she deliberately targeted the children. Joanna and Jacqueline died instantly, and Anthony, only 9, succumbed to his injuries en route to the hospital. John and Florence Pollock were devastated by the loss of their daughters. As grief hung heavily over their home, John clung to an unusual belief. He was convinced that Joanna and Jacqueline would return to them. This conviction only grew stronger when Florence discovered she was pregnant again. Florence's doctor had predicted a single birth, and with no family history of twins, the odds seemed slim. Yet on October 4th, 1958, Florence gave birth to identical twin girls, whom they named Jennifer and Jillian. The twins bore striking resemblances to their deceased sisters, particularly in their birthmarks. Jennifer had a small birthmark on her left hip, exactly where Jacqueline had one, and another mark on her forehead, mirroring a scar that Jacqueline had. The family moved to Whitley Bay, but Hexham's memories haunted them still. When the twins were 3 months old, the family decided to return to their former hometown for a visit. To John and Florence's amazement, Jennifer and Jillian seemed to know the town intimately. They recognized Hexham Abbey and described the playground where Joanna and Jacqueline once played. They even pointed out the school their older sisters had attended, despite having never seen it before. As the girls grew older, these eerie recollections persisted. When they were 4, a trip to Hexham revealed even more unsettling details. The twins led their parents to a playground they had never been to but navigated with an uncanny familiarity. Their memories seemed to transcend their young lives, rooted in the experiences of Joanna and Jacqueline. The story of the Pollock twins garnered worldwide attention, sparking debates about reincarnation. Was this case the first concrete evidence of souls reborn, or was there a more mundane explanation? Science weighed in with a different perspective. While some argued that twins were a rare familial trait, the occurrence of twins without prior history in a family wasn't unprecedented. Geneticists explained that while fraternal twins often ran in families, identical twins did not follow the same hereditary patterns. Identical twins occur in roughly 3 to 4 births per 1,000 worldwide, and usually arise without any clear genetic cause. Furthermore, medical advancements like assisted reproduction technologies, ART, have been linked to an increase in twin births. A 2016 study noted that fresh blastocyst transfers during in vitro fertilization significantly raised the incidence of identical twin pregnancies. Despite these scientific explanations, the Pollock twins' ability to recall places and details they had never encountered fascinated and perplexed many. Some saw it as undeniable evidence of reincarnation, while others chalked it up to coincidence or subconscious influence from their grieving parents. The Pollock twins grew up, and the memories of their past lives faded with time. Yet their story left a mark on those who heard it, and continues to fuel speculation on reincarnation. Number 12. The Leatherman Mystery. In the late 1800s, the town of Branford, Connecticut, had a peculiar visitor whose presence was as regular as the school bell. Each month, the students would eagerly await an unusual recess. Their teacher, with a mixture of anticipation and curiosity, would direct them outside. There, they would line up along the street, eyes scanning the horizon for the man who would soon appear out of nowhere. The old Leatherman was a walking urban legend, clad entirely in leather, from his coat and trousers to his hat and boots. He carried a leather satchel and wore an expression that spoke more of isolation than of any clear intention. His appearance was accompanied by the rustling sound of leather. His origins and what drove his endless wanderings were a mystery. His routine was as strange as his attire, a 365-mile trek through New York and Connecticut over some 35 days. He was a fixture in the region, yet his true identity remained hidden. The locals, enamored and perplexed by the old Leatherman, had no choice but to provide him a nickname that would become legendary. The first sighting of the Leatherman came sometime between 1852 and 1857, when he began to make his presence known in various towns along his route. His methodical strolls through these places were marked by his unmistakable attire and his quiet demeanor. He was described as a man of average height, with dark hair and a face that, if not for the whiskers and the leather, might have been striking. Anna Church, a local who saw him as a child, remembered his fair skin. She said if he had shaved off his whiskers, he would have been a very fine-looking man. Despite his intimidating outfit, the Leatherman was known for his non-aggressive behavior. He didn't steal or cause trouble. Instead, he preferred to keep to the periphery, avoiding eye contact and interaction. The children of Branford grew accustomed to the Leatherman's presence. They watched him from a distance, fascinated but unafraid. Occasionally, they would leave him some tobacco, though he never took it. Instead, he would gather discarded cigar butts and accept gifts of stew, bread, and other food offered by the locals. Despite his rugged appearance and solitary habits, the Leatherman was a well-known figure in the towns he frequented. He would often make use of caves for shelter, stacking firewood and creating makeshift homes to rest in before continuing his familiar journey. His unyielding routine was disrupted in 1888 when he was detained for the first and only time by agents of the Connecticut Humane Society. His tobacco habit led to a diagnosis of mouth cancer, and he was briefly admitted to a facility. Yet, true to his elusive nature, he slipped away a short while later, resuming his wanderings as it seemed to be the only thing he knew to do. The Leatherman's journey came to an end in March 1889. His remains were found in a cave in Sawmill Woods near Mount Pleasant, New York. According to an autopsy, he'd passed away from blood poisoning due to oral cancer. The leather suit, weighing a staggering 60 pounds, and a French prayer book were found among his possessions. These details suggested he might have been of French origin, yet no concrete evidence about his past or his reasons for wandering emerged. Various theories about the Leatherman's identity surfaced over time. Some speculated he was a man on the run from a crime. Others that he was a displaced shoemaker retracing steps in some kind of tragic quest. However, none of these theories could be substantiated. In a final twist, the old Leatherman's grave in Sparta Cemetery in New York was found empty during a planned relocation to a more secure location away from the highway. Theories abound about what could have happened, whether his body had disintegrated or had been disturbed during road construction, or whether another kind of intervention displaced his remains. His new memorial site remains a site of curiosity and reverence, marked with a coffin and plaque containing soil and nails from the original grave. Number 11. The Drowning of Natalie Wood. A sleek yacht known as the Splendor drifted off the coast of Catalina Island in 1981. The evening had begun with an air of celebration, a gathering of Hollywood royalty, but it soon descended into a horror movie that would forever mar the lives of those aboard. Beloved actress Natalie Wood vanished into the dark waters of the Pacific Ocean. Her body was discovered 6 hours later, floating face down. The world was shocked by the news. Natalie's husband, Robert Wagner, was devastated, or so it seemed. Alongside the couple on the yacht were Natalie's co-star in the film Brainstorm, Christopher Walken, and the yacht captain, Dennis Davern. The official narrative suggested a tragic accident. Natalie, tipsy from an evening of drinking, had slipped into the water without notice. But as the years passed, this tidy story unraveled. In 2000, journalist Sam Kashner delved into the ambiguities and inconsistencies surrounding Natalie's death for Vanity Fair. Susan Finstad's biography, Natasha, published a year later, further illuminated the troubling details of that fateful night. In 2011, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department reopened the investigation, and Finstad continued to dig deeper. The result was a comprehensive reevaluation of Natalie Wood's life and death. In her updated book, Natalie Wood, The Complete Biography, Finstad unearthed new details that pointed more convincingly to a sinister end. Her explosive, detailed findings suggested that Wagner played a role in Natalie's fall. As Finstad wrote, she felt an urgent need to bring Natalie's story to light. Over the years, she had become the keeper of the actress's most painful secrets, her fears, her traumas, her deeply rooted superstitions. Natalie had been a child star, pushed into the spotlight by her mother, and had endured psychological abuse and exploitation. Her life was marred by a string of personal tragedies and a prophecy from a gypsy that she would die in dark water. Her relationship with her husband, Robert Wagner, was notoriously tumultuous. In fact, their first marriage had ended in divorce before they reunited and remarried a decade later. The night of her death was chaotic. Witnesses reported hearing a heated argument between Natalie and Wagner. Davern, the yacht's captain, later admitted that Wagner had prevented him from turning on the searchlights to look for Natalie. It was only after 2.5 hours, with no sign of the actress, that they finally raised the alarm. The official autopsy report noted multiple bruises on Natalie's body, which the coroner attributed to her hitting the rocks while trying to climb back onto the yacht. But this explanation never sat well with those who knew her. Vidal Herrera, who photographed Natalie's body, described significant head wounds, suggesting a struggle. Dr. Michael Franco, an intern at the LA coroner's office at the time, observed bruises on Natalie's thighs and shins that he believed were consistent with being pushed off a surface. Franco's revelations were particularly damning. He recalled how the coroner, Dr. Thomas Noguchi, had dismissed his concerns about the bruises with the cryptic remark, "Some things are best left unsaid." Convinced of a cover-up, Franco held on to his suspicions for decades before finally coming forward. Adding to the intrigue, Christopher Walken, who had remained mostly silent over the years, was said to have confided in a friend that Wagner had pushed Natalie. Combined with Davern's testimony, this admission painted a chilling picture of that night. Wagner's refusal to search for Natalie immediately, his agitation, and the subsequent delay in reporting her missing all pointed to a darker truth. Natalie's sister, Lena Wood, had always harbored doubts about the official story. She spoke of a powerful Hollywood agent who hinted at knowing more about the incident but refused to divulge details, fearing it would harm Wagner. Lena's persistent quest for answers only solidified her belief that Natalie's death was no accident. As layers of this tragic tale continue to peel away, one thing has become clear. While those on board remain complicit, the truth of Natalie Wood's death would stay sunk at the bottom of the sea. Number 10. Mysterious murder of Cindy James. Cindy James, a nurse in her early 40s, was alone in her small house in Richmond, British Columbia, Canada. It was October 1982, and she had just finished tidying up when the phone rang. That ring was the beginning of what would become a 6-year nightmare. Cindy picked up the receiver, only to hear her name whispered. She hung up, trying to brush it off, but the phone calls continued, each one more unnerving than the last. They were filled alternately with threats and silence. Despite reporting the incidents to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the calls persisted. Although they were terrifying in and of themselves, she never could have imagined how they would escalate. Over the following weeks and months, Cindy's life descended into chaos. Rocks were thrown through her windows, her porch lights were broken, and there was even a break-in where her pillow was slashed. The harasser sent her taunting messages, kidnapper style, with letters cut from magazines, the most chilling of which read, "Soon, Cindy." Her phone lines were cut, leaving her no point of contact to the outside world. In November, Officer Pat McBride, a member of the RCMP, moved in with Cindy for a short time after they began seeing each other romantically. He hoped his presence would deter the harasser. One night, McBride found Cindy's ex-husband, Roy Makepeace, lurking behind her house. Armed with 2 guns, Makepeace claimed he was patrolling the area for Cindy's safety, but this seemed unlikely. The harassment turned to physical violence in January 1983. Cindy's friend discovered her with a nylon stocking around her neck, nearly strangled. Cindy recounted how a man had ordered her into the garage, where he attacked her. After this scary incident, suspicion fell on Cindy when she took 2 polygraph tests and failed. She also claimed to know one of her attackers, but wouldn't identify him. By October of that year, things had taken an even darker turn. In the yard, Cindy came across 3 dead cats strung from trees. A note tied to one of the cats read, "You're next." Desperate, Cindy hired a private investigator who equipped her with a radio for constant communication. His quick response saved her life on January 30th, 1984, when he found her unconscious on her kitchen floor with another nylon stocking strangling her and a note pinned to her hand that read, "Now you must die." The attacks became increasingly and bizarre. Cindy was found in July of 1984, again unconscious, her arms filled with needle marks and half strangled by a nylon stocking. Despite continuous police surveillance and phone taps, the incidents showed no signs of forced entry, leading to growing suspicion about Cindy's own role in the harassment. In December 1985, Cindy was discovered 6 miles from home, lying in a ditch with similar needle marks in her arm and a nylon stocking around her neck. Following this incident, her friends Agnes and Tom Woodcock took turns staying with her in hopes of deterring the attacks. One night, Tom discovered a fire in Cindy's basement, but police concluded she had started it. As her mental health deteriorated, Cindy was admitted to a psychiatric facility. After 10 weeks, psychiatrists concluded the attacks were staged by Cindy during psychotic episodes. Cindy herself wrote in her journal about her feelings of desperation and thoughts of ending her life. Despite moving and changing her last name after her release, the harassment resumed. In October of 1988, Cindy was discovered in her vehicle, hogtied and half naked, her neck wrapped with another nylon stocking. She accused her ex-husband of orchestrating these attacks, but Makepeace denied involvement and had alibis for several incidents. But on May 25, 1989, the chaos came to an abrupt end. Cindy vanished. Her day had been like any other. She had gone about as usual, depositing her paycheck, buying groceries, and picking up a gift. That night, Agnes found her home empty. Cindy's car was later discovered in the parking lot of a mall, the driver's side door awash with blood, and her wallet's contents scattered beneath it. A fortnight later, Cindy's body was found in the yard of an abandoned house. She was beaten, bruised, and had taken a lethal dose of morphine. Her hands and feet were bound behind her back. Despite the evidence suggesting foul play, the police ruled her death a... They argued that Cindy tied herself up and ingested the morphine before dying. Cindy's family and friends were convinced she had been murdered. Her father vehemently denied it was, arguing that Cindy could not have tied herself up after taking such a large dose of the drugs. The case remains unsolved, the mystery of a woman seemingly haunted by unseen forces, or, as some believe, haunted by herself. Number 9. The Axemen of New Orleans. On March 19, 1919, New Orleans transformed into a city-wide concert hall. Every dance club and bar brimmed with people, and jazz bands played in grand homes across town. But this was no ordinary night of revelry in the birthplace of jazz. The music was born of fear, not joy. 3 days earlier, on March 16th, the Times-Picayune published a chilling letter from a serial killer known as the Axeman. The letter warned that he would strike again at 12:15 a.m. on March 19th, sparing only those households that played jazz music. The city was gripped by terror. Although he is less famous than his mysterious counterparts, Jack the Ripper and the Zodiac Killer, the Axemen of New Orleans left a bloody trail of 6 dead and 6 severely injured. His reign of terror from May 1918 to October 1919 enveloped the Big Easy in fear, his spree ending as mysteriously as it began. The first strike was on the night of May 22, 1918. Italian grocer Joseph Maggio and his wife Catherine were found dead in their bed, their throats slashed with a razor, their heads bashed in with an axe. Joseph's brothers, who lived next door, discovered the gruesome scene. The killer had chiseled out a wooden panel on the back door to gain entry, leaving the axe in the bathroom and the razor in the neighbor's yard. Nothing was stolen. A cryptic message was found in chalk near the murder scene. Mrs. Maggio will sit up tonight just like Mrs. Tony. Police believe this referenced a Mrs. Tony Sciambra, a victim of a similar axe murder in 1911-12. This seemed to indicate that the Axeman's signature method had roots in earlier attacks. A month later, on June 27th, a baker found Louis Bessumer and his mistress Harriet covered in blood in their home behind Bessumer's grocery store. They had been attacked with an axe taken from their own house. Harriet later died from her injuries, accusing Louis of being her attacker and a German spy, despite himself suffering a fractured skull in the attacks. He was acquitted after 9 months. In August, pregnant Mrs. Schneider was attacked in her home, surviving with her unborn child unharmed. Her description of a dark figure with an axe marked a shift in the Axemen's targets, suggesting anyone in New Orleans could be next. The city began to panic. The Axemen struck again in August, attacking an elderly grocer, Joseph Romano. His nieces found him bleeding from head wounds inflicted by an intruder who had chiseled out a door panel. Romano died 2 days later. Newspapers reported armed men standing guard over their families, but the police were no closer to catching the killer. The Axeman's attacks made little sense. He always used household axes, never stole valuables, and left his tools behind. Although the victims were mostly Italian grocers, they had no clear connection, and not every victim fit the same profile. On March 10, 1919, the Axemen returned. Rosie Cordemelia awoke to see her husband fighting the Axemen. Charles suffered a fractured skull. Rosie was severely injured, and their 2-year-old daughter was killed. A fellow grocer discovered the crime and called the authorities. A letter from the Axeman to the Times-Picayune arrived shortly after. "I'm very fond of jazz music. If everyone has a jazz band going, well then, so much the better for you people. One thing is for certain, and that is that some of you people who do not jazz it out on that specific Tuesday night will get the axe." That is why, at 12:15 a.m. on March 19th, New Orleans vibrated with jazz. Local composer Joseph Davila's The Mysterious Axeman's Jazz became a hit. Apparently satisfied, the Axeman committed no murders that night. Yet soon, the terror persisted. The attacks resumed in August 1919. Grocer Steve Boca was attacked, suffering severe head injuries. Teenager Sarah Lauman was next, left with head wounds and missing teeth. The attacks followed the same pattern, except for Lauman's attacker entering through a window, leading some to suspect a copycat. In October 1919, the Axeman claimed his final victim, Mike Pepitone, a grocer and father of 6. Mrs. Pepitone saw 2 figures fleeing after the attack, but the Axeman's methods were unchanged. Mike died from his injuries. Then, the Axeman mysteriously vanished, leaving behind a legacy of fear and unease. His true identity was never discovered, but theories abound. Some believe the Axeman was part of an early mafia, targeting Italian-American grocers over unpaid extortion debts. However, experts doubted this, noting that mafia hits, even at the time, seldom left victims alive. The prime suspect was Joseph Mumphrey, a supposed blackmailer targeting Italian Americans. He was allegedly shot dead by Mike Pepitone's widow in December 1920. She claimed he was the Axeman, but no records confirm Mumphrey's existence, casting doubt on this theory. Due to the variation in the Axeman's MO, some believed there were either copycat killers or multiple individuals involved, working together or separately. As this is New Orleans, where ghost stories thrive, still others speculate the Axeman's supernatural claims and his ability to evade capture mean he must be a demonic spirit, as he claimed in his letter. Whether or not he really was a demon in the paranormal sense, he left behind a ghostly presence that once turned a city into a symphony of survival. Number 8. The disappearance of Susan Powell. On the night of December 7th, 2009, in a suburb of West Valley City, Utah, the Powell household seemed peaceful from the outside. Inside, however, the silence was deafening. Susan Cox Powell, a mother of 2, was missing. Her husband, Josh Powell, claimed she had been asleep when he left for a midnight camping trip with their sons, 4-year-old Charlie and 2-year-old Braden. The story he told the police was simple enough, but the truth was not. The next morning, the childcare provider became worried when Charlie and Braden failed to show up. Calls to both Susan and Josh went unanswered. Concerned, she contacted Josh's mother and sister, who in turn called the police. By this time, Susan had also been reported missing from work. Authorities broke into the Powell home, only to find it empty. 2 fans were positioned to blow air onto a damp living room sofa, a curious detail that added to mounting suspicion. Hours later, around 5 p.m., Josh and his sons returned. He was immediately taken to the police station for questioning. Josh was soon named a person of interest in Susan's disappearance. A 2-night special in the case aimed to explore the mysteries surrounding Susan's vanishing and the tragic aftermath. As authorities pieced together evidence, several key details shed light on the possible chain of events. Inside the Powell home, traces of blood were found on the tile floor near the damp sofa. Forensic testing confirmed it belonged to Susan. When questioned, Josh claimed he had cleaned the couch before leaving for the camping trip, but the blood, coupled with the odd timing of his departure, raised significant suspicions. A week after Susan's disappearance, Josh went to their local bank and withdrew all the money from her IRA accounts, using a power of attorney form. He also canceled her future chiropractic appointments. These actions indicated a premeditated plan, suggesting that Josh knew Susan wasn't coming back. In a safety deposit box hidden from Josh, Susan had left a letter titled Last Will and Testament of Susan Powell. In it, she expressed fear for her life, writing, "It may not be an accident, even if it looks like one." She mentioned Josh's threats and the extreme turmoil in their marriage. This letter painted a bleak picture of her domestic life and her growing fear of Josh. Further deepening the mystery, Susan had recorded a video documenting their home's assets on the advice of an attorney. She feared Josh might sell their belongings, as he had previously filed for bankruptcy with over $200,000 in debt. The Powells also had substantial life insurance policies, raising questions about Josh's motivations. Witness testimonies revealed that Josh had spoken about how to murder someone and dispose of the body without getting caught. He mentioned that an abandoned mine shaft would be ideal, a chilling statement given Utah's numerous unsafe shafts. Friends also recalled Susan discussing divorce. But even more devastating were the children's statements. Interviewed the day after Susan's disappearance, Charlie said his mother had gone camping with them, but didn't return. Later, he told a Sunday school teacher, "My mom is dead." Braden, the younger son, drew a picture of a car with 3 passengers, stating that mommy is in the trunk. These innocent yet haunting remarks suggested the boys had witnessed more than they could fully understand. Suspicion deepened when Josh removed the SIM card before handing his cell phone to detectives, and later activated a new phone in a town over 80 miles away. This attempt to obstruct the investigation further implicated him. Adding to the disturbing nature of the case was Josh's father, Steve Powell, who admitted to having a charged obsession with Susan. A search of his home revealed explicit images and writings about her, further complicating the family dynamics. Throughout the investigation, Josh and his father theorized that Susan had run off with another missing person, Steve Coaker. This story was rejected by both families. In 2012, amidst mounting suspicion and investigation, Josh murdered the 2 boys and committed suicide, bringing the case to a dramatic and tragic end. Despite the extensive investigation and the tragic end of Josh and his sons, Susan's remains have never been found, and her ultimate fate is still unknown. Any information about the case can be directed to 801-840-4000. Number 7. Overton Bridge. In the heart of Dumbarton, Scotland, the ancient stone of Overton Bridge looms over a misty ravine, and its tale is as eerie as its ghostly appearance. For decades, dogs have been compelled to leap from the 50-foot drop, often meeting their deaths on the rocks below, earning this Gothic structure the grim nickname of the Dogs. The mystery of Overton Bridge has puzzled locals, spawning rumors, legends, and even a full-length book. It was the summer of 2010 when Dr. David Sands arrived at the bridge, an animal behaviorist with a penchant for unraveling enigmas. Sands was drawn to the bridge's mystery. He was determined to uncover why so many dogs had plunged from this seemingly innocuous spot. Standing at the edge, he surveyed the landscape. From a human perspective, the bridge appeared to be a typical Victorian marvel, with its Gothic parapets and robust structure. But Sands knew he needed to see it through a dog's eyes. Most of the canine victims were long-nosed breeds with acute olfactory senses, and Sands had a theory that their heightened sense of smell might hold the key. As he examined the bridge's architecture, he noted the tapered edges. To a dog, it might seem like a solid, safe expanse, not the sheer drop it truly was. The thought that these animals could be chasing a scent was compelling. Sands had heard of wild creatures like minks living in the underbrush below. He hypothesized that the aroma of these animals could be luring the dogs to their doom. In his documentary about the bridge, Sands explained his findings. "I think it's highly likely in all the cases here at Overton Bridge that it was curiosity that killed the dog." To prove his theory, he set up an experiment, using the scent of minks to see if dogs would react. Unsurprisingly, many of them shot straight towards the smell, their noses driving them forward with unbridled enthusiasm. Despite Sands' logical explanation, not everyone is convinced. Dumbarton is a land rich in folklore and superstition. Many locals still whisper of the White Lady of Overton, a grieving widow whose ghost is said to haunt the bridge. They believe her presence stirs the dogs into a frenzied state, compelling them to leap. Even darker true stories circulate about the bridge's tragic past. In 1994, a man driven by delusions threw his infant son from the bridge, believing the child to be the Antichrist. The baby died from the fall, and the father was committed to an institution. Locals note with morbid fascination that the dogs often jump from the very spot where the baby had been thrown. They speculate that this horrific act has left a supernatural scar that disturbs the animals' minds. But Sands disagrees. It is a uniquely human concept, he argues. Dogs weren't leaping to their deaths out of a sense of despair. More likely, they were victims of their own instincts, driven by the sense that their powerful noses picked up. The scientific community largely sides with Sands. They agree that dogs lack the cognitive complexity to choose death over life. Yet the bridge's dark reputation persists, fueled by tales of ghostly apparitions and tragic histories. With the mystery unsolved, Sands offers a practical solution. Dog walkers should keep their pets on leashes when crossing the bridge to prevent them from taking the tragic leap. Number 6. The mysterious case of Mary Reeser. St. Petersburg, Florida, was in the grip of a sweltering summer on the night of July 1st, 1951. 67-year-old widow Mary Hardy Reeser was getting ready for bed in her modest apartment. She had been feeling particularly melancholy that day, disappointed over not being able to take a trip north as she had planned. After a visit from her son, she took 2 sleeping pills with plans to take 2 more and settle into her easy chair with a cigarette. The next morning, Reeser's landlady approached the apartment to deliver a telegram. As she reached for the door handle, she backed away. It was unbearably hot. Alarmed, she called the fire department, and they quickly arrived on the scene. Firefighters forced their way into the apartment, which was filled with a dense, acrid smoke. They found an astonishing sight. The remains of Mary Reeser had been reduced to a pile of fine ash. Only her left foot, still clad in a slipper, a portion of her backbone, and a shrunken skull remained. The easy chair she had been sitting in was charred, its metal springs protruding from the ashes. The surrounding area bore the marks of extreme heat. Soot-stained walls, scorched drapes, but bizarrely, much of the room and its contents were untouched by flames. Investigators were puzzled. The ceiling was damaged by smoke, and a beam required extinguishing, but other parts of the apartment were virtually unscathed. Newspapers on the water heater remained intact, and the stove, heater, and refrigerator showed no signs of malfunction. The only clue was a clock that had stopped at 4:20 a.m., possibly marking the time when the intense heat had fused its internal workings. The case drew national attention, with theories ranging from the plausible to the fantastical. Some speculated spontaneous human combustion, a phenomenon often met with skepticism by the scientific community. Others suggested a lightning strike. Though there had been no storms reported, armchair detectives flooded the police with letters offering various hypotheses, but none seemed to precisely fit the peculiar circumstances. A key piece of evidence was the absence of any odor of fire or smoke. Neither the landlady nor the neighbors had detected the smell of burning flesh or other materials. Additionally, there was no damage to the electrical systems, ruling out an electrical fire. No traces of accelerants like gasoline were found at the scene. The FBI joined the investigation, uncovering further peculiarities. There was no definitive time of death, meaning it was impossible to determine if the fire had burned quickly or smoldered for hours. Despite the intense heat necessary to cremate a human body, temperatures around 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, experts noted that the fire had not spread to the rest of the apartment, a fact that defied logic. In 1987, former stage magician turned investigator Joe Nickel and former forensic analyst John Fisher published a report in the Skeptical Inquirer attempting to demystify the Cinder Woman case. They proposed that the fire may have been slow burning, fueled by the chair's stuffing and Reeser's body fat. The room's concrete flooring could have contained the fire, preventing it from spreading. They also addressed the shrinking skull myth. Forensic experts suggested that the skull likely burst in the heat, and the shrunken object could have been a globular mass of tissue remaining after the head was destroyed. The duo's report explained that Reeser's stiff leg, which she kept extended due to a medical condition, was likely outside the fire's primary zone, thus escaping incineration. Despite these theories, many questions remained unanswered. How could such an intense fire leave so much of the apartment untouched? Why was there no significant fire damage beyond the immediate vicinity of Reeser's chair? The case remains a scientific anomaly and unsolved mystery. Number 5. Murder of Betty Shanks. In September of 1952, in a Brisbane suburb, 23-year-old Betty Thompson Shanks became the center of one of Queensland's most perplexing and brutal cold cases. and 60 years on, the case remains as cold as ever. The recent graduate of the University of Queensland was a dedicated public servant. She had just left State Commercial High School after sitting in on a night lecture. Her evening was meant to end in her parents' home on Montpellier Street. At 9:32 p.m., she was last seen disembarking from the Days Road tram terminus. The short familiar walk along Thomas Street from the terminus to her home was well trodden. But on this fateful night, Betty's path would be interrupted by a horror no one could have anticipated. By 10 p.m., anguished screams pierced the suburban night, reaching the ears of several residents. Some dismissed the sounds as the rowdy antics of teenagers at a school nearby. Alex Stewart, an off-duty policeman, heard the cries, but after peering through his window only to find nothing, he shrugged them off and returned to bed. The Shanks family was on edge. David Shanks, Betty's father, had waited up for his daughter, but as the hours ticked by, his concern deepened. When Betty had still not come home by 1:30 a.m., he called the police. At dawn on September 20th, Stewart headed outside for his morning paper. What he discovered would turn the small community's world upside down. Betty Shanks' lifeless body lay in the front garden of a neighbor's house, mere meters from the tram terminus. The scene was a grotesque display of violence. Betty had been brutally beaten, kicked, and strangled. There was no sign of assault, though her underwear had been removed. Her purse and jewelry were accounted for, though her bag's contents were scattered across the yard. 15 detectives from the Criminal Investigation Branch swarmed the scene, but the trail was cold and the clues sparse. It seemed the killer might have been interrupted by Stewart's light when he peered out his window that night, leading to the conjecture that the motive was not theft, but something darker. As details reached the media, Betty's parents made heartfelt appeals to the public. David Shanks' voice trembled as he told reporters, "Little did I know such a shocking thing had happened to Betty on a street she had known ever since she was a toddler." Betty's mother, in a poignant interview, described her daughter as all every mother could wish for. The Shanks family's anguish was palpable, their sorrow compounded by the fact that their beloved daughter was taken in such a vicious manner. The apparent randomness of the attack and the brutality of the murder led to widespread anxiety. The media labeled the perpetrator a maniac, exacerbating the sense of dread. Residents bolted their doors and windows, fearful that the killer might strike again. As decades passed, speculation about the murder has run rife. There have been numerous suspects and false confessions, but nothing that's led to charges. The case seemed to elude every investigative effort, slipping further into obscurity with each passing year. Some suspect that Betty had been a victim of mistaken identity, and that her tragic end might have been a macabre twist of fate rather than a premeditated attack. The Queensland Police continue to offer a reward of $50,000 for new information leading to an arrest and conviction, but there have been no new movements in the case. Number 4. Shepherd Murder Case. In the early hours of July 4th, 1954, in Bay Village, Ohio, the grand lakefront property that was the Shepherd residence seemed worlds away from tragedy. Inside, however, was a different, darker story. Dr. Sam Shepherd, a respected neurosurgeon, awoke to the sound of his wife Marilyn's screams. Stumbling out of his makeshift bed on the daybed downstairs, he rushed up to their bedroom only to be confronted by a horrifying sight. Barely conscious, Marilyn was being attacked by a white form. The next moment, darkness enveloped Sam, as he too was struck unconscious. When he came to, the house was silent as the grave. A sense of dread gripped him. As he heard movement downstairs, Sam confronted the intruder, a tall man with bushy hair, and chased him to the beach, only to be knocked out again. Disoriented and shirtless, he awoke partially submerged in the lake. Shepherd staggered back to the house and checked on his 7-year-old son, Chip, who slept undisturbed. In desperation, he called Spencer Hook, his neighbor and the mayor of Bay Village. The police arrived soon after, finding Marilyn's lifeless body on the bed. She had been brutally beaten, her face unrecognizable, her pajama top and bottoms disheveled. The scene was chaotic. Blood spatters marred the walls, and Marilyn's body bore the evidence of a ferocious attack. Coroner Sam Gerber arrived and immediately suspected a staged crime. No signs of forced entry, no murder weapon, yet a canvas bag containing Shepherd's blood-stained wristwatch, fraternity ring, and key was found outside. Gerber's suspicion fell heavily on Dr. Shepard. His alibi was shaky, his story of the bushy-haired intruder seemed implausible, and his demeanor was unsettlingly calm. The press latched onto the scandal, painting Shepard as a villain. The Cleveland Press, in particular, drove the narrative, demanding his arrest and trial. 2 weeks after the murder, Gerber orchestrated a public inquest, a spectacle held in a local high school. Under the harsh glare of media scrutiny, Shepard and his family were interrogated. Witnesses were called to testify about Shepard's character and rumored infidelity. Acting as judge and jury, the press crucified him. By October 18, 1954, Shepard was on trial. The courtroom became a circus, with the media jostling for sensational headlines. The prosecution presented grisly photos of Marilyn's autopsy and introduced the theory of a surgical instrument being the murder weapon, despite its absence. The prosecution's star witness, Susan Hayes, a former lab technician, testified about her affair with Shepard, contradicting his earlier denials. Shepard's credibility crumbled. His defense brought witnesses who claimed to have seen the mysterious intruder, but it wasn't enough. After 5 days of deliberation, the jury found Shepard guilty of second-degree murder. Life imprisonment awaited Shepard, but the toll was immediate. His mother committed suicide, and his father died shortly after. Shepard fought for his freedom from prison, supported by his brothers, who enlisted forensic scientist Dr. Paul Leland Kirk. Kirk's analysis revealed critical evidence overlooked during the trial, such as blood spatter, which indicated that the killer was left-handed, while Shepard himself was right-handed. Moreover, Marilyn's broken teeth suggested she had bitten her attacker, yet Shepard bore no bite marks. Despite these findings, Judge Blythen rejected appeals for a retrial. The case seemed sealed until Boston polygraph expert F. Lee Bailey took interest. Bailey argued before the Supreme Court that Shepard's trial was a mockery of justice. His efforts led to a retrial in 1966. This time, the presiding judge acknowledged the biased press coverage and judicial misconduct. Shepard was acquitted. The years following his release were tumultuous. Though he regained his medical license, Shepard faced malpractice suits and personal turmoil. He descended into alcoholism and depression, dying in 1970 at just 46. Shepard's son, Sam Jr., dedicated himself to clearing his father's name. Subsequent investigations pointed to Richard Eberling, a handyman with a suspicious history, as the likely killer. DNA evidence supported this theory, but legal vindication remained elusive. Number 3. Havana Syndrome. The pulse of Havana's nightlife bumped outside the U.S. Embassy, a contrast against the dead silence inside the building. This was the backdrop for the beginning of an investigation into a phenomenon that would become known as the Havana Syndrome. An investigative team from 60 Minutes recently exposed startling new evidence, a suspected link between these enigmatic incidents and a covert Russian intelligence unit. A tale of intrigue and potential warfare that seemed too elaborate for mere coincidence. The story began in 2014, when Oriano Zil de Granados, a 60 Minutes producer, was covering a story in Cuba about the opening of the U.S. Embassy there. The festive occasion was overshadowed by a wave of strange ailments striking embassy staff and their families: dizziness, memory loss, and unexplained pain. Reports began trickling in, and it wasn't long before Zil de Granados found herself embroiled in a story that extended far beyond Havana. A chilling pattern emerged. In Guangzhou, China, in 2017, Mark Lindsay, a security officer for the State Department, and his wife reported hearing an unsettling noise in their home, a sound described as like a marble swirling down a metal funnel. This bizarre auditory experience was soon followed by debilitating symptoms: dizziness, severe headaches, and memory issues. Lindsay, who had worked with classified equipment, suspected a targeted attack using radio frequency energy. But convincing his superiors was another challenge altogether. As the truth began to unfold, it was found that this was no mere coincidence. It was a calculated assault. Yet the full extent of the technology behind these attacks remained undercover. By 2022, 60 Minutes had expanded its scope to include domestic cases, revealing that the mystery of Havana Syndrome was not confined to overseas postings. Former Homeland Security Advisor Olivia Troy recounted a sudden, piercing pain and vertigo while descending stairs near the White House. Her distressing experience, coupled with symptoms resembling those of other victims, added weight to the theory of a directed energy weapon. Similarly, Miles Taylor, a former deputy chief of staff at the Department of Homeland Security, described an unsettling incident involving a white van outside his apartment. Days later, he experienced concussion-like symptoms. These domestic occurrences, coupled with reports of strange sounds and subsequent debilitating ailments, suggested that the attacks were more widespread than initially thought. In 2022, James Benford, a physicist specializing in microwaves, confirmed that portable microwave transmitters capable of damaging brain tissues existed and had been developed by several nations, including Russia. The possibility that such technology could be used as a weapon seemed increasingly plausible. However, it was the investigation led by Christo Grozev, renowned for uncovering the operatives behind high-profile poisonings, that would bring the most dramatic twist. Grozev's breakthrough came with the identification of a top-secret Russian intelligence unit, Unit 29155. This elite team, known for its use of counter-surveillance and advanced weaponry, was suspected of being involved in the Havana Syndrome incidents. Grozev discovered a crucial document, a receipt for acoustic weapons testing. The implications were staggering. Suspicions turned towards Unit 29155's potential role in using directed energy weapons against US diplomats. Evidence suggested that a member of this unit, Albert Averinov, might have been present in Tbilisi, Georgia, during reported incidents. Yet, despite these revelations, unanswered questions remain. The CIA and Director of National Intelligence were skeptical, with assessments suggesting it was unlikely that a foreign actor, including Russia, was behind a sustained worldwide campaign. There was still no smoking gun. For Zilda Granados and Ray, the journey is far from over. The quest for answers about Havana Syndrome is far from finished. The search continues. Number 2. Ed Baker Mystery. In an isolated field near Houston, Texas, on November 8, 1985, a luxury Jaguar lay in ruin. The once luxury vehicle had become a smoldering skeleton of charred debris. The police discovered within a body so scorched and deformed that its identity was impossible to track. Forensic tests later confirmed the body belonged to Edward Gerald Baker, a name once synonymous with wealth and power. The titan of Texas industry had built his fortune in oil. From humble beginnings as a shoe salesman, he had ascended to the heights of multi-million-dollar oil investments. His empire, Vanguard Groups International, flourished in Houston's booming economy. But by 1985, his success had begun to unravel. The story of Baker's decline was a tale of excess and misfortune. Divorced from his first wife in 1984, Baker had embarked on a lavish new life, complete with facelifts, gambling, and a shiny Jaguar. He married and divorced again, eventually trying to tie the knot with Vanguard employee Sandy Hoff. Meanwhile, his financial empire teetered on the brink of collapse. Baker's once solid investments were softening, and he was suspected of embezzling from his clients to support his extravagant lifestyle. By October 1985, Baker's situation was desperate. Investors demanded their money, and Vanguard faced bankruptcy. Baker had started to borrow from increasingly dubious sources, and he was aware of dangerous affiliations tied to these financial lifelines. Bob Gale, Baker's private investigator, was hired to look into potential mafia connections of these sources. On November 6th, just days before his death, Baker visited his ex-wife Mary. Panicked, he confided in her about receiving death threats and feeling as though he was being followed. She described him as pale and terrified, saying, "He told me that someone had called his unlisted home and said it was his day to die." Sandy was also alarmed. She was sent to Austin for her safety, while Baker spoke to her by phone late into the night while locked in their bedroom. The next day, everything came crashing down in a fiery spectacle. His destroyed Jaguar was discovered in a remote field, reeking of gasoline and death. Arson investigator Terry Bird noted the crude attempt to destroy evidence. 3 gallons of gasoline had been poured into the vehicle, ensuring it was consumed by flames. Alongside the charred remains was a letter that would stir debate and suspicion for years to come. Addressed to his attorney, Ward Busey, the letter read, "Dear Ward, if you're reading this letter, it means that I am dead. I've had some threats on my life. You've been a good friend to me. Please take care of Sandy and the kids, and do what you can for them. Accompanying the letter was another addressed to Sandy. To many, this seemed a final farewell. Yet the letter's timing and content only fueled speculation. Had Baker truly taken his own life? Or was it calculated murder? Detective Ronnie Phillips, who was investigating Baker's case, discovered that Baker had recently inquired about his life insurance policies, specifically asking if they would cover. This detail reinforced the theory that Baker had orchestrated his own death to ensure his family's financial security. However, Sandy Baker was not convinced. She enlisted private investigator Keith Lyons, who believed that Baker was murdered, possibly by the mafia. In an even more audacious theory, some believe Baker staged his own death and started a new life elsewhere. Despite substantial evidence, Baker's fate remains a mystery. Was Edward Baker a victim of his own desperate machinations? Or was he indeed murdered, his life snuffed out by those who stood to gain from his demise? The Scorched Jaguar has carried its secrets to the grave. Number 1. Angie Hammond abduction. On April 4th, 1991, in small-town Clinton, Missouri, Angela Angie Hammond, fresh from high school graduation, disappeared without a trace. 4 months pregnant and engaged to Rob Schaefer, the whole world was ahead of her. But that night, her future was destroyed. Angie and Rob had plans to reconnect later in the evening after she dropped him off at his parents' house. As midnight approached, Angie called Rob from a payphone located at the corner of 2nd and Jefferson Streets. Rob could hear the unease in her voice. She had spotted a green Ford pickup truck from the 70s with a fish decal in the back window, a detail she mentioned to Rob as she described the vehicle's unusual presence. A bearded man had used the phone next to her and then returned to his truck, where he shined a flashlight around. Sensing something was wrong, Rob suggested Angie ask the man if he needed help, concerned that the other phone might be out of order. Rob's instructions were met with an unsettling no from the man. As the conversation between the couple continued, Angie let out an unexpected scream of terror. The line went dead. Frantically, Rob ran outside, driving to the payphone's location just 7 blocks away, where he arrived in time to see the green Ford truck speeding off. Rob pursued the vehicle, but this pursuit was cut short when his car broke down during a desperate U-turn. He watched helplessly as the truck disappeared into the distance, taking Angie with it. The police arrived on the scene soon after, but despite their efforts, no trace of Angie could be found. Years passed, and the case of Angie Hammond's disappearance went cold. That is, until the 30th anniversary of her abduction. The Clinton Police Department warmed the cold case with an unsettling update posted on their Facebook page. A strange letter received on the very day Angie vanished. In ransom note style with cut and paste letters, this chilling piece of evidence had been sent to a confidential informant who would help thwart a major drug operation. Sent on April 4th, 1991, the same day Angie disappeared, the note contained the informant's number and his estranged wife's name. It suggested a chilling possibility that Angie's abduction was a tragic case of mistaken identity. According to the investigation, the informant's estranged wife and daughter, also named Angela, lived in Clinton at the time. The theory proposed that a criminal organization, possibly retaliating against the informant, had mistakenly kidnapped Angie Hammond instead of the informant's daughter. The Facebook post ended with a plea for new information, highlighting a call from an anonymous tipster who mentioned 2 names. Any information about the case can be directed to the Clinton Police Department at 660-885-2679.